All right, so Amber, what is a public matter for today, this week?
All right, so we have Juneteenth and slavery. You know, what is slavery?
Right.
How is slavery affecting us today?
Mm-hmm.
And who exactly started or had slaves, or has it stopped, or whatever. And then we also have some current affairs for you to go over and discuss.
Yeah, I've got a couple of current events, things that's going on, and you'll like them.
All right, so Juneteenth, which just happened on Monday, which was June 19th, which apparently was because of... so the story goes like this, at least from what I have read repeatedly, which is the narrative that's been given, is that it took a while to get to Texas.
Yes.
The Emancipation Proclamation, whole slavery thing. So when it got to Texas and they announced that it was, slavery was abolished and people had to, be done with it or whatever, it happened to be June 19th, 1865.
Right.
And the governor of Texas was the one that said, this is a thing.
Right.
Now, it didn't become a federal holiday until the George Floyd issue in 2021.
Right.
So it was not something that was really discussed or talked about or really known about. Not necessarily for a long time, but like I know in the 60s they kind of went back and forth with it, but they were more focused on civil rights movement, so it kind of got dropped to the wayside, because supposedly this has been something that African American communities have been celebrating since 1865.
Oh, really?
That's what I read.
Nobody really knows about it, though, right?
Right. So it wasn't a huge thing, but apparently it had been a huge thing in those communities and in those areas, and people know what it is. Now, mind you, most people, at least, that I've run into, before the George Floyd debacle, had no idea what Juneteenth was. And
I'd never heard of it.
Some people don't even realize that that's what it is, that's what it happened.
Right.
So I think that it's more of a tabloid kind of...
you think it's kind of made up?
Right. Like, it's like, look what we did as the Biden administration. We did this for you.
Right.
And I don't...
It is a federal holiday.
Yeah, which is what? What does that mean?
It means that generally banks are closed. Certainly federal offices are closed. So post office... Even though the post office was delivering mail on Sunday, I guess they were preparing to have a day off on Monday. But, yeah.
Well, you do know that Amazon uses the post office, and you get Amazon packages on Sunday because they promise that, even though the Postal Service doesn't give it to you, which is... Is
this like having a second postal job? The service has got a second job?
Yeah.
Because they're not making ends meet, yeah.
So, all right, so then our next thing that we're going to go over is... slavery. So slavery is something that has happened all over the world. Has slaves or anything like that? Because I mean, technically, like if you think about sex trafficking, we still have slaves.
Yes.
So we have, mind you, I did look up, which I found to be very fascinating to me, that child labor is not considered slavery because it helps the income of the family.
Okay.
Which was what I found up when I looked up in Bartanica. .com.
Okay.
When I looked up that, I was like, wow, that's fascinating that you can say child labor is not slavery because they are helping the income of the family. So that I found to be fascinating. I think the idea of slavery is, one person owning another person.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily mean white people owning black people or black people owning black people, because that did happen quite frequently.
Yes.
Now, mind you, again, I did read another article that stated, despite the fact that there were quite a few black families or black people that owned slaves.
Right.
They did it because they were helping out their family members.
That's a fact that blacks did own slaves in the United States.
Yeah. And here's another fun fact, is that Irish slaves were actually cheaper to buy than black slaves.
Yes.
And there was actually more Irish slaves than there was being delivered around the world. So why are we not getting, is the word reparations. To Irish folks or families? Is it because they're white?
Because they're white. Nobody represents whites.
Right.
Remember that. Nobody represents whites anywhere in the world.
So, we have, which I found to be fascinating, I actually heard that today, that Irish slaves were cheaper than African slaves.
Right.
Also, I don't think that people understand that Africans were selling other Africans.
Well, that's how they got them.
I find it fascinating that we are still discussing slavery when about white people owning black people, or that there were only black slaves, when there was a totally different. I mean, there were even slaves like Indians had slaves of other Indians.
Every continent at one time or other was the entire world was involved with slavery. It was part of culture back then.
Yeah.
It was accepted to a certain point, and it was just part of what went on. There was slaves in every continent. Africa had thousands and thousands of slaves. The Africans sold the slaves in the slave trade.
Yeah. I mean, I find it to be, but I just find it to be fascinating that we're still having to deliver or give some kind of acknowledgement that people in America have to bow down to this idea that black people are still oppressed.
Right, yeah, sure.
And that they're still not able to get the same treatment or the same kind of things that we as white people get today.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist, because I do think that it does, but it works both ways. I mean, like, for instance, you've got Candace Owens who said, if you can take a sentence and switch it, and make it so instead of a white person, like, for instance, like, they have black wine, and it's called wine, I think it's called, it's in Target, it's called Black's Wine, or the Black's Wine. I don't remember how it works. If I had some kind of wine that I made that says the White's Wine, that would be incorrect, and I would be considered racist.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit the narrative the other way, so if you spin it, you're exactly right.
Like, that's what Candace said. If you can spin it, and it sounds racist to you, because it would be racist to you,
absolutely,
then it's racist the other way.
Right.
You know, like, for instance, like, all these companies that are saying black-owned. Why aren't you telling me about white-owned? And to be honest, I don't care whether it's black, brown, or white-owned. If it's a product I want, I'm going to buy it. Yeah,
exactly.
I don't give a shit whose product is selling what. You know, it's the same thing for like, women-owned. I don't care.
Yeah,
it's irrelevant to me. Yeah. If I need this product and I want to use it, then that's the end of the story.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. I believe that I should get the best product, regardless if it's from a man, woman, or child, or white or black. Yeah. I want the best possible thing out there.
Sure.
I'm not going to buy something just specifically for who made it.
Right.
I mean, yes, am I going to buy local compared to big companies? Yes, that's what I am going to do.
Right.
But I don't give a shit who made it if it's what I'm looking for.
Right.
You know, and this whole idea that...
Well, it propagates their narrative that there is racism going on and so forth, because they keep wanting to... On one hand, it seems that they want to identify themselves as no different, but then they want to recognize themselves and be rewarded for the fact that they are black or whatever. So they keep propagating this on, whatever suits them best. On one hand, they don't want to be recognized because of the color of the skin or so forth, but on the other hand, they do.
Right.
So,
And that is the thing too, is that we're not even being taught correctly about slavery
Right.
in school, and the information we're getting is completely one-sided, and it's not fair to put this propaganda or news or information out there as the all true, and that's just what it is. Because people have no idea that black people were not the only slaves that were out there. People legitimately think that's it.
That's correct.
That's the end of it. They were the only ones. Yet you have all these Irish slaves.
Sure.
And I think the word slave is a Slavic term.
Well, a lot of the people that came here were indentured servants, which is another type of slavery. You have to work yourself out of it. If you didn't work yourself out of it, then guess what? You were essentially a slave until you died if you didn't work yourself out of it.
Right. Which, I guess it's good in the sense that you could work yourself out of it, which that's another
Blacks,
thing.
yes.
A lot of black people were also able to buy their own freedom.
Yeah, and then they bought their own slaves, which is a fact. Look it up.
Yes, that is true. They did. There was actually quite a few of them that I believe one, I forget what his name is. There's a very predominant Democrat who was in charge of doing certain things. He was a black Democrat, obviously, and he owned quite a few slaves, and he had no problem with them, and he just said that they weren't the same as him, and they didn't deserve the same rights.
It'd be interesting if we could get that name for the viewers at some point, bring it up maybe in the next show, because I think I know who you're talking about, but I don't want to mention it. But here's an interesting tidbit on slavery that you may have come across in your research. Did you know that the last legal slave trade ship that entered the United States, based on law, was in 1807? That was the last. After that, it was illegal slave trade. So it was ending on its own. The culture of it was ending, all on its own.
Yeah, it was moving, but we've transitioned now to having a sex trafficking, drug trafficking,
yes,
which is the same thing, yet we're not discussing that.
No.
We want to keep talking about slavery,
the black slavery
and
yes.
the black slavery. We're not talking about the children, or even the Mexicans, or the different people that come into this country illegally with drugs and paraphernalia as as slaves.
Sure. And here's another tidbit going back to the American slave trade in the United States at the time, that the United States had fewer than 4% of the black slaves in the world. Countries like Holland and so forth had about 12%. So the United States proportionally had a small amount of the black slaves in the world. And again, those slaves are being sold by tribes and so forth in Africa that were selling them. And many people don't realize that that's another fact. And I was watching some videos, actually listening to them. And these videos, these audios were done in the late 20s or early 30s, and they were talking to Civil War veterans, and they also interviewed former slaves that were still alive, and talking about their life as slaves. And I'm not saying that things didn't happen to them, the slaves as a whole, that you can't answer for it all, but I remember listening to this one woman who absolutely loved the family that she was owned by. Yeah. Her whole family loved them, and they got along very well. They took them to church. They taught them to read, because they realized that, like a business owner, if you want to think of it in that way, that these people were important to their businesses, and they needed to be treated well. They needed to be fed well. They were clothed well. And that wasn't the case in all cases, but in the majority of them it was. And here's another tidbit. Slaves weren't used to build railroads. Building railroads was extremely dangerous. So Irish and Chinese who were here, again, you were talking about the Irish that were here. Right. They're the ones that built railroads in this country, particularly like railroad tunnels and so forth. Slaves were just too valuable to risk in these jobs, so they never used them as labor in these, or mining or anything, because it was just too dangerous. And slaves are often, again, they were very well taken care of in most cases, and they were even insured. They insured their slaves.
Yeah, well, they were more expensive than the Irish ones. That's why they got sent to the railroad. You're not going to give up your...
Exactly.
your
So
own.
we have, what you're saying here is we have a very bad picture based on our modern educational system of what slavery actually was. You're not condoning it, but the true picture of it really doesn't exist.
Right. And I'm going to bring up Mel Gibson.
Yep.
Who's actually doing I think it's a 4-part or 6-part, I think it's a 4-part series on child and sex trafficking.
I read this.
He's about to, which no one likes him because, he's ridiculous and says whatever pops into his head, I guess, and racist slurs, I think it is. Did he say something racist? I know he's very Christian.
Well, the thing that happened was he was picked up, I guess he was drunk driving. And this is probably 18 years ago, 15 years ago.
It's been a long time.
And he went off about the Jews.
Oh.
He went on a rant about the Jews, and that took some years to get through. And
I guess my final note is that I do think slavery is bad. I'm not saying that I'm thinking that slavery is...
I'm a slave.
Not. We're all slaves to this technology and to our government at this point.
That's what I wasn't referring to, though. I wasn't referring to that.
Okay, well, and then I wanted to actually, so...
Are you going to read the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery? Or do you want me to do it?
You do that, because I can't. I don't have my glasses on, so you...
Neither do I. But there's an important thing here. Do people think that slavery today is over because of the 13th Amendment?
Yes, most people do.
It isn't, and I'm going to read it to you. Slavery is not over in this country, and I'll read it. The 13th Amendment, which was ratified December 6, 1865, just post-Civil War, and this is what the 13th Amendment says. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or in place subject to their jurisdiction. So slavery is not over. Slavery is legal. If you were duly convicted, slavery can exist under those terms. 13th Amendment did not end slavery. Slavery is not over. So people who think it is, it's not. So just to educate you on the 13th Amendment, which did end involuntary servitude, there is slavery if you are under penalty of law. So, but that would be interesting to find out if anybody exercises that anymore, but it is not over. So, there you go.
Maybe they do. Okay, so, but to wrap up real quick what we talked about with George Soros giving his son the reins of his...
He's a bad boy.
His, I think it's called the Open Source Foundation. I think that's what it's called, or Open Society Foundation. It's one of the two. I can't remember the name of it. But the one that he gave it to is a 37-year-old,
yep. And
he passed over his 52-year-old son, who is a lawyer and in finance. But that was the first marriage. Supposedly they had a falling out. But here's the kicker. The 37-year-old is very political, very diverse, and he is very interested in the diversity, inclusion, and I feel like there's one more, but I always forget it. But yes, so that's...
Equity and inclusion.
There, it's equity. That's what I always look for.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's what I always miss. And so he is the one that's going to be the newest face of George Soros' money.
Right.
Even though George Soros is definitely telling people what to do.
Did you hear what his son said about taking over for his dad? He was going to be 100% worse than his father.
He did say that. He said, I'm going to be 100 times more political than my father. Because George Soros was actually, I think, planning to kind of back up from the political thing because of this whole thing with Trump and Alvin Bragg and all that.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why he got forced into stepping down was because I don't think they wanted him to cut off the money.
Right. Oh, God. No.
For this whole indictment and whole ridiculous...
Oh, no. Do you think George Soros is actually going to sit back in his rocking chair? And you think he's really done?
Oh, no. He's just playing the game.
I think until he draws his last breath, he's going to be very much involved.
And it's just like Rockefeller, so, yeah.
Absolutely. and I think he probably chose his younger son that's 37, so the legacy keeps going that much longer.
Well, that's true, and then the other one's just into finance and lawyer. He's not interested in political.
Right.
He's not interested in that at all.
Right.
So, yeah.
And remember our show about NGOs and who's running them, because George Soros is tied in World Economic Forum under Klaus Schwab, and we know what they're doing, what they're up to, and what they're pushing. So.
Oh yeah, we got to do another show actually on Bill Gates' company.
Yeah.
The I think it's called what's it called? Eureka? No, what is it called?
I don't remember the name of his company, to be honest with you.
It's something advisors, and it's what funnels the money into the Bill and Belinda Gates Foundation. And it's also another company similar to like Vanguard and State Rock that funnels money into another way of giving countries and companies money. Right. So what did you have to talk about?
Well, I want to continue on with my shit show. So there's a number of things going on. I'm not going to talk about any one topic, so I'm going to touch on a few things that's going on right now, because we'll keep going with a couple of the current events going on right now. But touching in with what you said, we were talking about on slavery. There's 612,000 white soldiers who died during the Civil War to settle that score. 360,000 or so were Union soldiers. There was a handful of black soldiers, and I'm not going to discredit them, but it was primarily paid for by the blood of whites. And during this whole thing of recognizing Juneteenth, nobody has taken any time to recognize the hundreds of thousands of others who died to free them. And it wasn't about, this was a war about state rights, and it did involve slavery, but the problem here was it was state rights. But there was 360,000 white Union soldiers who died to settle that score, and nobody is recognizing them, and I think that's a problem. If you're going to remember Juneteenth, you damn well should recognize the 360 some odd thousand white northern soldiers who died to free them, to settle the score of state rights. So I think that's important to add in. Yep. So that's my little piece on that. I wanted to talk too about the current events here. You know who Lauren Boebert is, right?
Well, I think you told me about it.
Well, she's a congresswoman from Colorado, and yesterday she introduced articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. Now, I don't think it's going to go anywhere, because I don't know if she's got the support in the Rhino side of the aisle to get enough votes for this in the House of Representatives, and certainly it won't go anywhere in the Senate. So, but I think it's important, and she did make an important statement where she said to I forget what his name is, Bannon, in an interview, that she's not waiting, because she's saying the rank and file Republican leadership right now is saying it's not time, you've got to wait. And she goes, it is time, we can't wait, I'm not here to wait. So I got to give that woman credit. She's got some nerve. She's got some, and she did not vote for that friggin' that spending bill that we just paid for.
Oh wait, did you hear about the mysterious? I think it was 602 million more that went to Ukraine that we didn't know about.
Yeah, they amazingly came up and found that there was more money. I did read something about that.
I didn't really research it, but I did see it.
I did too.
That it was an additional to what we've already done.
Yeah.
They miscalculated.
Yeah, we didn't give them enough, so they found that money that we didn't give them, so we just turned around and gave them some more money at our expense here. So let's just keep running the numbers up and putting us farther and farther in debt. And you got to remember, we're giving money away to them that we're going to pay back. They have no obligation to pay it back. We don't have any treaty with them.
No.
And they're losing their shirt over there too. So we're throwing bad money. Instead of trying to end this damn war, we're throwing money into it. It's a proxy war right now. And the people who are all for peace and so forth seem to be very inclined to want to send money over to Ukraine, where the piano player, the penis playing, the piano, how do you say that? He plays the piano with his penis, and you look that one up, you can watch that. That's disgusting. Who's the Zelensky? who owns an $11 million. He gets paid $11 million a year, and we're sending millions over there. This guy arrested his opposition leader, and his opposition party was banned. So yeah, we're supporting democracy around the world.
Yeah. Oh, so wait, before you get into that, so I actually just heard, so JFK's nephew, who was it, Robert Kennedy? Is that who's running for president?
No, that's RFK Jr.
So he's
Robert Kennedy. Yes, he's thrown his hat into the ring.
Yeah, so he was talking, I just saw him, not that I'm a huge fan of some of the things that he says. Some of the things he says are pretty legit.
Right.
But he was talking about the CIA and how his, uncle wanted nothing
JFK.
JFK wanted nothing to do with it, which is true. I mean, that's data that's been known.
Right.
But he was saying that he actually didn't want to do wars. He wanted to get more diplomacy in different countries.
Right.
And in Africa, I didn't even know this, they have a lot of things like museums, schools,
right.
streets named after JFK.
I didn't know that.
Statues, because he did a lot diplomacy-wise
right.
for Africa and South Africa.
Well, he started the Peace Corps, which we sent people around the world to help them build better mud huts and grow rice and so forth. So it's interesting. They probably got some mud roads over there that are named after JFK.
They probably do.
So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about this guy out... the SBRs. I want to cover this SBR thing for 2 seconds. SBRs, and this will go nowhere either, but it's encouraging that at least something's happening. The House of Representatives just passed a House Joint Resolution Bill 44, which basically says that SBRs can exist without a registration, which is good, but it will go nowhere in the Senate. So I thought I'd bring that up. At least somebody out there is trying to do something, and it's not all negative, but maybe some of these folks, in my opinion, are just voting for this because they know it'll go nowhere in the Senate too. It just makes them look good. So, but I figured I'd bring that up. We'll see. Keep an eye on it, see what it does in the Senate. It's going to crash and burn, in my opinion, but to close the loop on the SBRs as of right now, because we spoke about that recently. But getting into the guns here, there was the gentleman out in Great Falls, Montana, a place that I was at not long ago. He owns a gun store. His name is Tom Van Hoos, who owns the Highland Creek Outfitters, was raided by agents of the IRS and ATF. It was really an IRS raid with support of ATF and local police. There was over 20 of them that showed up, all kitted up there, just like SWAT. This guy just opens his door in the morning. I don't know why they couldn't have gone in if they were looking for his records, his sale records, with a form 4473, I believe it is, when you fill out when you purchase a firearm. So they went in there not for sales, looking for whether or not he's got proper sales records. They were looking for his records on these people who were purchasing weapons, and so this is what's going on. Again, this is another indication of weaponization of these agencies. The IRS has armed agents. Many of you probably just heard about the millions of rounds that they've purchased and the hundreds of thousands of firearms they've purchased as well, and the training that they're receiving, SWAT-type training to do these raids, the IRS. So Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan, go fuck yourself, because both you guys bitch and moan about these things, all these things, and you just helped fund it. You just gave all the money they needed for 87,000 IRS agents to do this shit to other Americans. Excuse my French, but that pisses me off. I don't know what she's out for, just sound bites, but that fucking pisses me off. And I don't know any other way to frame that. It just pisses me off. So I don't know what their motivation is, but I thought I'd add that in. But this guy was raided, and this is just another indication of these agencies coming down on store owners. And so this was not necessary. There was no reason to go in there with these guys dressed up like SWAT if they were just after records. But this is intimidation, and they wanted the press from this too. Now, don't forget that one of the reasons why they did this is because they wanted that intimidation, fear from the IRS particularly, and ATF in regards to all these things. This is a fear tactic. They knew that this was going to go viral in the alt media. So keep an eye on this. There's going to be more of this going on. So I wanted to bring that up as a current event. And here's another one. This is a chuckle. Everybody heard about the bridge collapse on the highway in Pennsylvania. Did anybody catch John Fetterman introducing Joe Biden at a Pennsylvania infrastructure event?
Now, I'm standing next to the president again, next to a collapsed bridge here. And he is here to commit to work with the governor and the delegation to make sure that we get this fixed quick, fast as well, too. This is a president that is committed to infrastructure. Yeah, and then on top of that, the dual kind of law of the inflation bill that is going to make sure that there's going to be bridges all across like this, all across America.
This is where this was an absolute mental train wreck where these two fucking imbeciles were in front of the podium, especially Fetterman, who's dressed like an 11-year-old kid at a fucking skateboard park with his hoodie on, stumbling, can't form a sentence, can't fucking form a word, bumbling through this, and this guy is elected. If this shit doesn't scare you that these two clowns are actually elected, illegally or not, I don't care if there was one person that fucking voted for him. I'll tell you what, if you voted for this goddamn couple right here, then you need to go fucking play in the street, and you should play in the street, because, you know, we've got this shit is just going on, and it's got to stop. This is a train. If you don't laugh, you should cry, or one before the other or something. So I just thought that was interesting. And then I want to talk about a little meme here, because we got all this LGBTQ stuff going on, right? So I saw this cute little meme I thought was, you know, sometimes these memes just say everything you need. So there's a kid dressed up as a pirate, and it says, at 5, I identified as a pirate. My parents took me to the children's hospital. They removed one of my eyes and put a patch over it, removed one of my legs and put on a peg leg, and then I had a hand removed and they put on a hook. My pronouns are P and irate. Get it? Pirate. Arr. So, you know, this is to illustrate the absurdity of this. So at 5 years old, this kid's saying, like, well, this meme is saying it, you know, well, he thought he was a pirate, right? He wanted to be a pirate in the worst way. What's wrong with that and so forth? So they took him to the hospital and they did this mutilation of his body to make him into a little pirate, you know, to illustrate what's going on with what the LGBTQ, you know, the alphabet group is right now forcing this stuff on this legislation you can read about. And for instance, Newsom there, if parents don't give in to the whims of their children, they get these mutilating surgeries to change their sex. The parents can be held liable for that and actually do jail time. So it's really pathetic. It's out of hand, and I thought I'd bring up that meme. All right, we'll close out by reading a quote here, because I love reading from the Founding Fathers. And let's see, I'll read one here that I think might be fitting. Okay, all the things going on, whether it's the budget, things going on, whether Second Amendment or your First Amendment rights being abridged. This is something from James Madison in his speech to the Virginia Ratifying Convention, June 16, 1788. And James Madison said this: there are more instances of abridgment of freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. Look that word. But basically he's saying a sudden takeover or something sudden. It goes gradually. And you'll see this, what's going on right now. Even though it seems accelerated, it's rather gradual. It's been gradual. So keep your eyes out and be aware of what's going on. They do this stuff incrementally. And they've certainly got their foot on the accelerator right now. But this stuff goes on slowly so that you just accept it. You accept it. You accept it. So I just thought I'd bring that up, that the Founding Fathers are very aware of these types of things happening with our style of government. So with that...
that is the end.
That is the end. Well, press the like button. We want to hear comments and all that stuff, because we want to bring you a better show, and we would like to hear from you. Say good, bad, or other, but be polite. So anyway, take care. See you next week.